Hello, Internet! Greetings from the Comic Watcher Show. I'm your host, Matt. With me is my ever-loving co-host, Mike. How the heck are you, Mike? How's life on the East Coast?
Life in the East Coast is pretty good. It's kind of cold. They are saying we're going to get snow starting tomorrow, but that means we're probably going to get rain. And if
You'll probably get sunshine.
Well, if it does turn to snow, it's going to be slush. And then we'll just shut down the whole, East Coast for like 3 weeks and rebuild and apply aid. But we're better than that. Yeah, East Coast, we're doing just swell.
Excellent. So, this week, we, the internet's foremost experts on comics, are diving into the Great Spider-Man Debate 2022.
Yes.
We're going to tackle Spider-Man's most divisive and passionate debates from his 6-decade career as a post-college age web slinger. And by gum, by the end, we're going to have some definitive answers. What say you, Mike?
Hopefully, get into, single Peter, married Peter,
web pits, web pits.
Yeah, and maybe talk, if you have like a favorite story, favorite panel, maybe you have a favorite writer, maybe you think Dan Slott is like a Chipotle where you know what you're going to order, but you don't know how it's going to be made. And I say that with all due respect.
Chipotle or Chupacabra, you decide.
There you go. Talk about that. Sure, we're going to talk about that.
Oh my gosh, yes, we're definitely getting into it. We might even talk about a thing or three about symbiotes. You never know, because we love symbiotes on this show. So let's just dive in first and foremost with the marriage debate, Mike. So, of course, Spidey got hitched back in 1987.
Yep.
It was infamously and notoriously ripped from our bosom in 2008. Yes.
Yeah.
And by a silly story involving a deal with Mephisto. And all that time, that's sort of irrelevant to where we're talking about right now. There was a long-standing and very passionate debate: should Spider-Man be married? Of course, on the one side, you've got the folks like, hell yeah, let him be married. I mean, he's happy, he's in love. Reed and Sue got married. There's precedent for it. Go with God. On the other side of the fence, you've got your other diehard classicist views. I know he should always be single. He should always have woman. Peter Parker, the core of him is to have problems, and having relationship problems is among them. Mike, where do you fall on this thorny debate? Wow, that was weird. Mike just vanished. Okay, well, I will tell you where I fall on this side of the debate. Well, he just apparently learns how to work the internet. I grew up, I came of age reading comics in the 90s and as a young adult in the 2000s. So for me, the default setting, if you will, for Spider-Man is to be married, and not just married, but married to Mary Jane. There's Mike. Mike remembered how the internet worked.
Whoopsie. No, it's a heavy fly day. I live right next to the jet base out here in Virginia Beach. And so there was like 3 flybys really quick, and all of a sudden I didn't see StreamYard. And so I'm like, oh my, what just happened?
It's the 5G. That's what it is.
Apparently, if it's not the 5G, it's going to be the gas streams. But no, so where we leave off?
Man, I was just telling the kids at home about how I came of age reading Spidey in the 90s and as a young adult in the aughts. And so for me, my default setting is married Peter. To me, this is a natural progression for the character. Yeah. It didn't come up. If you go back and read those issues that lead right up to the wedding issue, it's not the most organic thing in the world. He and Mary Jane had been on again, off again for a while. And suddenly it's like, I'm just going to ask you to marry me now. And so it happened. And Stan Lee officiated at a baseball game. And, but, for a generation, that's just the default setting for Spidey. Now,
Mm-hmm.
older fans, and I don't want to turn this into a generational divide, have it. There's more of a tendency to uh, view that maybe not in such good terms. But Mike, where do you fall in the debate of should Spidey be married or no?
I think he should be. I think that's what makes Spider-Man and Peter kind of the complete character. I know one of the reasons why he's one of my favorites is the fact that he's so kind of relatable. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's a lot of arcs, and even not even arcs. There's just tons upon tons of issues that have such a natural feeling, and then he's just an easy character to get behind. And so I think, like you said, we grew up with that era of Peter, in the wedding, and so it was kind of like how and this may be a generational thing, but I just think natural progression. I think it helps the character, and I think the writers tend to write a little better, if this even makes sense, but a better character when he's kind of married, because it adds just that extra amount of depth. Because now, say, like, the Goblin can come back after, the Hobgoblin, you got Jackal, whatever of the great amount of villains we have in the Spider-Verse, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, I just think it's natural progression. I think it just feels more natural. It's Peter Parker. Peter Parker is a natural feeling character. We read Iron Man comics, Tony Stark, maybe it's because of his, monetary status. I don't know. It just doesn't feel natural. Even
Well, he's less relatable, right? I hear what I think that's, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
There's and I mean, this is inherent to Spider-Man's appeal, is he is the first everyman hero, right?
Yes.
And I say that there's that element to the FF, and I don't want to ever take that away from them.
Mm-hmm.
But what Stan and Steve, or Steve and Stan, whichever you prefer, they deliberately concocted a teenage hero that teenage readers could identify with, and that had just never, ever, ever been done.
Right.
Period.
Right.
Like, I don't care if you're hung up on the fact that Clark Kent grew up in Smallville or whatever. Like, I'm sorry, but Golden and Silver Age Superboy comics are not fucking relatable.
No.
And he's a down to earth kid, but he also hangs out in the 30th century and has a secret cave and has a flying dog. Like, Peter Parker, in the meantime, is getting, called a wallflower and pushed around by bullies, and he has to worry about whether or not his rent's going to get paid on time.
Right.
And
we've
got John Edward Lee from the site watching us. Hey, John Edward Lee, he's our Star Wars expert reviewer for the site. Hi, John. Welcome.
That is a great what if. That is a good what if.
That is a damn good what if. What if Spider-Man married Black Cat? That we're gonna get in some Black Cat talk here. Don't you think we're not? But so here's, and I say all that to say this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people felt like Peter Parker getting married to this beautiful redhead who's a model, who eventually has an acting career on a soap opera briefly, etc., kind of betrays this everyman ethos that Spider-Man is built on.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, what do you think about that?
I mean, everyone knows the story. You know what I'm saying? I think Peter and MJ, we could go with the comics. You got the movies. You got especially with No Way Home. I think that's what's expected at this point. I mean, Peter's been around for so many years. All the stories have been told. Now it's up to the point where now you got to put a spin on it to make it interesting. And I think as long you have to have certain pieces, and I think MJ is always going to be that piece.
I think so too.
Regardless of what arc, I mean, you could bring the Sinister Six back. You got Venom, Carnage, whatever. But it always seems like there's, you know, MJ wiggles. Someone puts an MJ scenario, flashback, flash forward in the book, you know, and it's almost at this point, like I said, it's expected, you know, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. That's almost a comfort thing, you know. It's almost like when you do read a Spider-Man comic, you look for that comfort of Peter being, like we talked about already, just being that normal guy who got bit by a spider, you know, and it's, and then you bring in that MJ factor that's super relatable. It's almost, you know, it's like that warm jacket on a winter's day, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not as though Mary Jane just came out of nowhere, right?
Right.
Like she been around since Amazing issue number 42. There was the wonderful subplot leading up to her where Aunt May keeps trying to set Peter up with his neighbor or her neighbor's niece
daughter, right?
and
Yeah. It wasn't the daughter, the neighbor's daughter?
Niece.
And
Peter has this fear that, oh, if my elderly frail aunt's trying to set me up with her, she must be this hideous woman and no good. And then of course, you know, you turn the page when she's finally revealed and she's this beautiful fun-loving redhead, and you know, face it, Tiger, you hit the jackpot. And I mean, Mary Jane in some way, shape, or form has just always been in the picture, in the periphery. And it, you know, these things evolve. It's not as if there was this long play over the course of 25 years, right?
Right.
To eventually get these two together. There were lots of writers to that story, and MJ dips in, MJ dips out. Gwen Stacy's alive, Gwen Stacy's dead, etc. So the Black Cat comes along, being all slinky and crazy.
Not slinky.
And never. But Mary Jane perpetually is around. She's part of his life. She knows his identity. And I'll be honest with you, I actually don't know exactly when she finds out his identity, or at least I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact that she was one of like two people, maybe, man, well, really one person, because everyone else found out seemed to die, that knew Spider-Man and Peter Parker were the same person. That matters.
Yeah.
It matters because it makes her an integral part of his life. And unless you really just retcon some bad crap out of the story, she's always going to be an integral part of his life, even if you write a stupid story about deals with the devil. And you know, look, to me, I get where folks are coming from. The old heads and he should always be blah blah blah.
Right.
But let's be real. He's been, if you take the number of years in comics that he was married or in a relationship with Mary Jane versus not, it's about even, which is actually kind of an interesting split if you're using that to represent the argumentative divide here.
Right.
One of the good things that came out of Nick Spencer's run that wrapped up late last year was he finally got Peter and Mary Jane back together after the whole Brand New Day era started, and they were broken up.
Yeah.
And they, like, lots of writers had danced around it for a while, and at the end of the day, though, Nick Spencer was smart enough to know what readers wanted.
Sure.
And I mean, to an extent, so is Marvel, because Marvel knows that these old head readers are not the future. They're not the ones that are going to dictate what the next 30 years of Spider-Man looks like, right? It's the kids that are reading now. It's the kids that know Mary Jane as being part of Spider-Man. They're not stupid. They know they need to play to the familiar with those kids and those readers.
There's nothing wrong with that if the character's right. You know, I think you can only travel that road with a select few of characters, and Spider-Man being one of them. that especially now where it's, you see kind of like, the modernization of Peter coming in, he has those modern problems. Once again, these writers are taking Peter and they're adjusting him to the generations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Albeit at different speeds, but I do think overall, and there's a little bias in this statement, obviously, but I think that's also one of the best characters that in comics that have done that successfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, and obviously, like I said, there's there's dry moments. There's going to be up and down. This character is over 40 years old. We've heard everything. We've seen everything. We get long time. 40 plus. Well, long time, right?
60, dude.
Right. Well, I said 40 plus. I'm covering base.
You said 40, which would make Spider-Man younger than both of us.
I said, well, I mean, maybe. I mean, stem cell research has made leaps and bounds, sir.
You're not wrong.
Thank you very much to our 4 viewers here. We're trying to entertain them. But realistically, I think though that they have really adjusted him well, and dare I say it, I mean, are we going to see a writer that's going to finally kind of divide Mary J and Peter? Are we ever going to see that? Could we see that successfully?
Well, we've seen that.
Well,
the way that it was done was horrible and boring and shite storytelling, and
because it's going to happen in a modern story way. It's gonna happen. What John say?
John says he hates classic MJ, maybe his least favorite character ever. She's too hot and famous for Peter, and she knows it. She constantly is upset that Peter has no time for her. Ain't nobody got time for that.
My man.
Counterpoint. This is a nerd with no social skills, and listen, he's gonna do whatever he has to do to keep on keeping on with that relationship. Right. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, Mike, you and I fall squarely in the camp of pro married.
Oh, absolutely. Any day of the week and twice on Sunday before Mass.
Oh yeah, for sure, and after Mass. And during Mass.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Praise be.
Okay. So now then, we were talking about Mary Jane.
Yeah.
Let's get into the Mary Jane versus Black Cat debate.
Oh.
And I'm not throwing Gwen Stacy in there because Gwen Stacy got thrown off a bridge 50 years ago, and despite their attempts at making her cool, now with basically reimagining the character from the ground up as Spider Gwen / Ghost Spider, whatever. That's a wholly different character than the one that was around in the 60s and very early 70s. To call her a little bland is being generous, but we get it. She has more impact in death than she did in life. So that's why I don't necessarily think that Mary Jane versus Gwen or Black Cat versus Gwen is really a valid argument. But, however, Felicia Hardy, now people got mad love for Black Cat.
They do. They should.
Despite the fact that she is at least superficially a major ripoff of Catwoman.
It's fair.
It's totally true.
Yeah, well,
you love her anyway.
Superheroes are going to borrow from superheroes.
Yeah. You know what? And I kind of dig. Marv Wolfman created Black Cat, and I kind of just dig the idea of like, you know what? Let me just give Spider-Man a Catwoman. Why the hell not? And she grew and changed and became a fan favorite. And during one of those periods in the 80s, she had a long, protracted relationship with Spider-Man, more than Peter Parker.
Yeah.
As of course, and I know, but ultimately what ended that relationship was the fact that she liked Spider-Man more than she liked Peter Parker.
Right.
And but at the same time, there's a side of Peter that's like, hey, hot costume action.
Yeah. Well, it could be on Felicia as well. I mean, it's like you said, she likes Spider-Man more than she liked Peter, and that is just that's classic kink right there. If that's
Hey, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, she's walking around with like 2/3 of each boob hanging out of her costume. She's gonna have some kink,
right?
It just is what it is.
Well, I mean, chasing after dudes in red and blue spandex. I mean, I'm not judging. I mean, we all have our
no. We all have our things.
Yeah.
So
real.
Yeah. And as Black Cat has in recent years, and let's say the last decade or so,
sure,
has had, I think, a pretty good, solid resurgence in popularity because I don't know, writers are just figuring out, hey, this is a really fun character. She's a fun character to play off of Spider-Man, and the fact that she makes him uncomfortable, yet at the same time,
he can't get enough of her.
Can't get enough of her. That's right. And so, there's clearly something there. They do on a certain level. They obviously care about one another.
Yeah,
to a degree. And so, I mean, what you got here with Mary Jane and Black Cat, my friend, is your basic Betty versus Veronica
easily
situation. So, go ahead, try to solve that riddle.
Well, I think this is where Peter shines as being a human, and as they play it perfectly, because like we touched on earlier, there's a Peter Parker and there's a Spider-Man. There's a Peter Parker that is in love with MJ, married to MJ, wants to settle down, have little, arachnids with her and stuff. And there's also the Spider-Man, and he knows what he's doing. They do the team up, and it's almost like a social media crush. It's almost like that online crush. Yeah, and I don't. And I know there's probably going to be people that you see this. It could be a hot take, whatever. But I don't think he would. I think at the end of the day, he's still going to go with Mary Jane. I think.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question.
Black Cat is nothing more than that work crush that you see at the Xerox machine, and instead of making one copy of the morning notes, you're making like 15.
Oh man, that's an interesting way to put it.
Right, you're getting the cup of water. You already have the cup of coffee, and now how do you get your 20 copies? I'm sorry, I said 15 copies. Your cup of water and your coffee back to your desk while trying to satisfy your work crush. To me, that's Spider-Man and the Black Cat relationship.
Okay.
That's how I've always seen it. Like I said, I mean, valid. She's a great character. She's a valid character. You almost need her just as much as you need, Mary Jane in that when we were talking Spider-Man. But I think overall, at the end of the day, MJ is still going to get the golden ticket.
Yeah, for sure. But of course, just as a fun character, and not for nothing, Jed MacKay wrote a series of really fun miniseries and then a short-lived ongoing involving Black Cat that got a lot of love from a lot of cool people. So, okay, all right, we're gonna hit a softball now. This is just kind of a fun one. Okay,
lay it on.
All right,
go.
Web pits or no web pits?
No web pits.
Oh, we disagree. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the argument.
Yeah.
And this is more of a silly argument. This is definitely a nerd argument.
I wonder if you're going to say what
it's very nerdy, a geeky nerd argument.
Yeah, go ahead.
So of course, Steve Ditko originally draws Spider-Man with the web pits coming down, attaching his arm to his side. Subsequent generations of artists do not. There's a case to be made that the web pits look a little weird.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best design element. However, it all depends on the artist, right?
Right.
Some of the time that Steve Ditko drew these things, man, they looked like little bat wings.
Right.
Like it got a little out of control. And that's not a good look for anybody. But
squirrel in a weird suit.
Yeah, like flying squirrel spider, man. And yeah, but the classicist take is
Sure.
Ditko designed it this way. By gum, it should be there. Um, I'm honestly very impartial on this one. I don't care. It's
Yeah.
ultimately very minor detail.
Yeah. I just think for me, it's one of those things where I can't stop looking at it. It's like it's not bad. I don't hate him. I mean, and kind of, I guess overall, I'm more like you. Like you put him on. If dude wants spider pits, put him on his pits. It's fine. But
it's just weird, right? Like, what purpose do they serve?
Right. It's like that part in Uncle Buck where John Candy's in the principal's office.
Respect.
Right. And he can't stop looking at her like mole or something, and he's like, oh, what are you? It's a melanoma, and it's like he just can't stop looking at it. I just can't stop looking at it. I'm not saying that, his web pits are melanoma by any means. That's not my point.
That's a very weird skin cancer happening there.
I know. I like analogies, and that's, to me, that's what the web pits are. They're that buck melanoma,
right?
Take them or leave them, but get them checked.
Right. Yeah, I think take them or leave them. I think I can hang with that. All right, that was our little softball one. We could go back and forth on the size of his eyes on his mask too. Do we do giant McFarlane eyes, or do we do normal sized Ramita eyes?
McFarlane, as much as we love it, every artist tries so hard to recreate the webbing that Uncle Todd gave us, and some succeed, and some Image 30, and some kind of, and some, we'll say it's a homage, but yeah, it's definitely the eyes, man. When McFarlane had, you remember those glasses that you could see like in the back of you? They were like these square things you could order them off TV. Yeah, that's what they remind me of, because they're just so huge.
See, I loved. I mean, I didn't even mean to start this topic off. I just thought I was being funny, but I love the bigger eyes look.
Yeah.
To me, yeah, that older, the Ramita style, the Ross Andrews style of drawing the eyes, to me, it just looks dated.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. Because see, like I would enjoy, like, if I could get the McFarlane Spider-Man with the Romita head, I would be fine. I'll be good to go.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, if I could do, I mean, obviously,
my personal 3 favorite Spidey artists of all time are all ones that draw the eyes very large. So, McFarlane, Larson, and of course Bagley.
Yeah, they're like car windows. They're like my Honda Civic.
Actually, there were subsequent artists by like the mid to late 90s
right,
that really were drawing them to where the eyes together took up about 60% of his head, and it just looked bad. Very bad.
Like backup mirrors or something in your Jeep.
All right. Okay. We're gonna talk about a very divisive writer now.
Here we go.
In the annals of Spidey history. And that's Mr. Dan Slott.
Okay. I'm ready for
Dan Slott likes to poke bears.
Yes.
Quite a bit, and take that which is considered sacrosanct and saying, haha, I did this. And then writing what some consider a very good story out of that. Dan Slott, his star started he'd been writing in comics since the 90s.
Yeah.
I think his first public work was like an issue of Ren and Stimpy or something like that. Like Ren and Stimpy 6 or 7. I may even have it somewhere. Then in the mid 2000s, he starts writing things like getting his hands on things like She-Hulk and I'm drawing a blank here, but he starts making a little name for himself. And then when they do the big Spidey rebranding with Brand New Day, he was part of that original. Remember, they had 4 different writers in the Spidey Brain Trust. It was him and Joe Kelly and I'm drawing a blank on the other two, but whatever, irrelevant to this conversation. And eventually, of course, Dan Slott just becomes from that point on the sole writer at a specific point. And Zeb Wells, that's who it was. Zeb Wells wrote Shed. Don't forget. Yeah, that's an awesome lizard story. Dan Slott put in something really unheard of anymore and was on Spider-Man for 9 freaking years. You never see that anymore, ever. Like, writers just come and go. There's a big announcement that such and such big name writer is taking a book over, and then, they only are writing an arc. Or, Donny Cates only wrote 30 issues of Venom. Or, no, let me rephrase that. 12 issues of Guardians of the Galaxy, to use that exact writer in this exact example. And then you're left feeling sad inside because you wanted so much more and you're expecting so much more. And it turns out the writer just kind of came off like wanting a paycheck. But Dan Slott comes in for 9 freaking years and he did some wacky things, dude. He brought back the Clone. Riley, like, in a major way. He made Peter Parker rich and essentially for a brief while Marvel's Tony Stark, because Tony Stark was not rich at all during that time, or actually he might have been dead at that point.
He also don't forget Superior Spider-Man, that whole run.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That was probably his master stroke there, was quote unquote killing Peter Parker. And Otto Octavius taking over his body and being the quote superior Spider-Man for 30-ish issues, however long it was.
And it worked.
And I mean, fans were pissed, but at the same time, they couldn't get enough of it. Like, Dan Slott is that writer that people just love to hate.
Yeah. Dan Slott, I'm telling you, back to earlier in the show, he is that Chipotle burrito. Same ingredients. We're going to get the order the same thing, but it may be made different, slightly different. Maybe there's not enough jalapenos on it. Maybe they didn't roll it as tight and it falls apart after about 3 or 4 or 5 bites,
I sure hope not.
Right?
Maybe you got E. coli. To extend the pain of the Chipotle analogy.
Now, if anyone will ever get this to Dan Slott, know that we're not saying that you were giving people E. coli.
No, I like Dan Slott. He's a good writer, and I like the fact that he's willing to take those risks.
Yeah.
And I also like the fact that he's proven enough of a winning track record that Marvel is willing to let him take those risks. Right. Like, you got to remember, this isn't just Marvel. This is Marvel as owned by Disney. Sure. Must protect the IP. Yeah. So anytime we see them doing something with these characters that is a big risk, like having Dr. Octopus take over as Spider-Man for two years or however long it was, that shows a lot of faith in the writer. And I don't think Marvel or DC get the credit they deserve when it comes to stuff like that. In fact, what they typically get hit with is fanboys bitching that somebody dared upset the apple cart.
Well, and at the same time, it's like, Spider-Man's been around, decades upon decades. And the thing is, like I said earlier, we've heard the stories. Now we need the writers to give us something with a different spin, but at the same time, kind of keep it in that neighborhood that we're familiar with, so it doesn't chase fans off. It's like with Superior, when and I was kind of one of those, Spider-Man's always on my pull regardless of where I've lived, but even when I read that, I'm like, man, I don't know about this. Well, it's going to be in my pull anyway, so I'm going to read it. And I kind of ate a little bit of crow in that, and I'm just like, oh God, Dan Slott is, it's up, it's down, but like you said, he's
Spider Island. There's another good one.
Yeah, Goofy.
Everyone in New York has Spidey powers all of a sudden.
Right. Once again,
really shouldn't work, but wow, that's actually a really fun story.
Right. And I think Dan Slott doesn't get enough due credit.
I agree with that.
I don't think so, and I don't think that's the hot take. I
don't think it's a hot take at all. I can ask on Fantastic Four right now.
Yeah, and I think, with Dan Slott, he's just kind of, from what I take away from, articles and reviews, and then, social media, whatever, it's like, God, you act like, Dan Slott took this beloved character and completely redid him. He
Yeah.
didn't
Spider-Man punches kittens now.
Right.
No.
We're not crossing over with Inspector Gadget and the Transformers here. I mean, this is solid stories that we're
I
getting.
agree with that.
Actually, that would be pretty kind of badass.
Yeah.
All right, bad analogy. Cut that out. But anyway, but yeah, I just think Dan Slott really deserves to be in that conversation of really great to maybe on some type of Mount Rushmore of Spidey writers, because I think when you look at his arcs, and you, like you said, even throw Back in Black, stuff like that.
Well, Back in Black was before Dan Slott.
Was that before Dan?
Yeah, because that was the story that led up to One More Day.
Oh, who did Back in Black? I thought that was Dan.
That was still Straczynski.
Was that okay?
Yeah, because that's the arc that it came out of Civil War when Peter announces his identity publicly, and then Kingpin took out a hit on him, and Aunt May wound up getting shot. Okay, yeah, that's what leads up to the Mephisto deal.
Gotcha. But either way, I still think Dan Slott definitely deserves to be in the talk of.
Yeah, for sure.
Because,
and I mean, no, he does deliberately do things that he knows are going to provoke a reaction, right? Like he knew that bringing back Ben Reilly was going to provoke some ire.
Son of a
and I'll be totally honest with you, Mike. I was that fan.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting here reading Clone Conspiracy. I'm like, what? Clones? Bullshit. What's up with this Jackal with the
as you look
mask of Jackal? And then it was Ben Reilly, and I was just like, fudge you. And I mean, just guttural reaction. Look, we lived through the 90s, okay? Like, we bear the trauma of the Clone Saga.
And the thing is, and
all
maybe
years later.
Well, I mean, thanks to Image, but that's for a different show. But I still think Image gave birth to Ben Reilly, but that's for another show.
Nah, DC did. There's a clearer through line from Death of Superman and Breaking of Batman to the Clone Saga than anything else.
You think so? You think that's
no, absolutely. Because DC made buku bucks.
They did,
right?
Oh my God, the market.
They made
both.
Then they made Hal Jordan go crazy, right? Yes. They got a lot of attention there, and so Marvel's like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? Well, let's do this clone thing and reveal that Peter Parker was the clone the whole time. Let's make Tony Stark a teenager. Let's put Cap in stupid looking Iron Man fake armor.
Yeah.
And on. Let's put a bucket on the Thing's head because he got in a fight with Wolverine and his face got jacked up.
I think we have our episode. We do. What do you want to talk about next week?
I think we could talk about this. But to get back on track, no, absolutely. The stuff that went down at Marvel with our favorite characters, 93, 94, 95, absolutely stems from Marvel trying to ape DC's success by breaking Batman and killing Superman. And it blew up in their faces badly. So badly. And I mean, so you can indirectly say, therefore, that the death of Superman and Nightfall ultimately gave us Heroes Reborn, because Marvel would never have been in the position to have to beg the Rob Father and Jim Lee to save their asses on the sales side if those things hadn't happened.
Please, no. Send help.
Listen, I have a ton of opinions on this one.
Yeah,
we'll get back to what were we talking about? Oh, clones.
Yeah,
so and Dan Slott. Dan Slott is cool. We like Dan Slott.
Yes.
And I mean, just the very fact that I've got a really good, like lifelong friend. He's a lifelong Spidey reader, and like he just could not get past the Dan Slott story of making Peter Parker rich. He's like, Peter Parker isn't the rich guy. He's the guy that's always screw up. I said, yeah, but this whole story is about what happens when Peter Parker stops letting Spider-Man stop him from reaching his full potential.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course how it all falls down around his head like a house of cards, which is what happened.
Right.
And I think that's great because that's an angle we've never seen with Spider-Man.
Right.
Unfortunately, you know, the clone conspiracy kind of diverted away from that story. But man, I'll tell you, Dan Slott, he gets so much hate, but he doesn't deserve it.
Nope.
9 years on Spider-Man is really amazing. And I mean, really, that's nearly a full decade out of a 6-decade-old character's lifespan that one writer was in more or less in charge of his adventure. So there is an indelible stamp on Spider-Man and his legacy by Dan Slott that should not be slighted.
No, and that's what kills me, and that's why I love, like, every now and then he'll get on Twitter and kind of,
he doesn't tweet super often.
Yeah, and he'll kind of bite back, and it's so good because you just it's a quick heart, and you just start reading that thread, and you're going, oh yeah, like Dan Slott, yeah, okay, gotcha, you know. And it's funny because it's always the trolls that are like, how do you confront a guy that wrote a character for almost 10 years with like weak arguments, you know? And it's like, I don't know. I like you said, I think he gets, you know, a lot of undue, you know, gruff, but at the same time, it's nice to see him on social media every now and then kind of.
Yeah, like, I get it. With as much crap as is pitched his way, I would stay off social media too. Like, there's just a bunch of assholes on social media, as you know, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody to hear that.
No, not.
So, okay, man, man. We got going on that longer than we meant to.
Good. Well,
okay, let's have another fun one then. Who is the best Goblin? We've got a Green Goblin, we've got a Hobgoblin, we've got a Demo Goblin, we've got, unfortunately, the Gray Goblin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that. We've got a Queen Goblin coming up in Amazing in another couple issues. We don't know what's up with her yet, but we've never had a Lady Goblin before. Is Green Goblin 1, Green Goblin 2, or Green Goblin 3? Right? So many goblins, right? Barry from Oak City, Michigan. Detroit Rock City, baby.
Oh, there you go.
I knew that song. He says it was Ned Leeds. Now that, of course, is a whole nother can of worms as to was Ned Leeds really the Hobgoblin? Roger Stern says no, but Peter David said yes first after boy, that's a whole God, we could go into that for a while.
Yeah.
But really, who is your favorite Goblin villain?
Oh, it's the Hobgoblin any day of the week. Well, just because the character itself continues really just to kind of scare the crap out of me. I always thought the Hobgoblin was creepy. You know, even now.
Are you talking? Let me ask. Are you talking about pre-demonic possession Hobgoblin or post-demonic possession Hobgoblin?
Well, originally pre, but even post is still good. You know, I just think that there's something about him that I don't know. There's certain, villains that, everyone always thinks like, God, if you were to meet this villain or you were to meet this super, like, what would you do? And Hobgoblin is just one of those villains. Like, I would rather have a picnic in Central Park with the Joker than try to mess with the Hobgoblin.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a personal favorite character.
I actually came into Spidey in Maximum Carnage. So interestingly, my very first as a reader Goblin exposure was to Demo Goblin, who most fans have completely forgotten today. Mm-hmm. And I just have always loved the color scheme of the kind of yellowish skin with the blue and red tunic that's torn. I always just thought he looked really cool. and then he got killed by like one of Craven's kids or something during the Clone Saga. But that was Mayo, and I really liked his deal that he wanted to kill quote unquote sinners, yet he was a demon. I mean, that totally was cool when I was 13, right?
Right.
And of course that demo goblin came about because the demon with which the second hobgoblin, Jason Masondale or Masondale, whichever, is separated from him, and then the demon became his own thing. It was really weird. It was in Web of Spider-Man. Web of Spider-Man, always the low-hanging fruit in terms of quality on Spider-Man titles back in the day. But
I just forgot. I don't mean to cut you off. We forgot the Red Goblin.
Oh, I forgot about Red Goblin. Good call.
Now that's one creepy dude. I don't think he beats the Hobgoblin, in my personal taste, but the Red Goblin is still a pretty formidable foe, if you will.
True. And it's just interesting though that the Goblin motif has ultimately grown so many legs and run so long throughout Spider-Man's multiple decades, because like, Mike, have you ever read Amazing Spider-Man number 14, his first appearance?
I don't think so. 14
it might actually be the worst issue of Stan and Steve's run. It is so goofy. Like, the Green Goblin stages a phony movie production or something. If the enforcers get involved somehow, like, there was absolutely nothing in the reading of this comic to imply that this character would have any sort of longevity. And
now I got to go look that up after the show.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still a Steve Ditko and Stan Lee Spider-Man comic. You should totally read it. Anyone that loves comics should read it. But it's like, what? They did not know what they were going to do with this character yet. And of course, the lore goes, the legends and the myths go, of course, that it was the last straw between Stan and Steve was their infamous argument over the identity of the Green Goblin. And let's just for the sake of argument say that is true. And who knows? We know now that there were tensions brewing between the two for a very long time. They weren't even talking anymore. But let's just for the sake of argument say that they ultimately split up because Stan Lee wanted it to be somebody relevant, i.e. Norman Osborn, and Steve Ditko wanted to just be some guy. Stan won that argument. Sorry, Steve Ditko partisans, but
that's one of those.
Nothing inherently interesting or dramatic about Green Goblin's identity just being some schmuck you've never heard of.
Right. I
think the fact that initial reveal of, oh my gosh, this villain was Peter's best friend's dad the whole time, somebody he knew and thought was a good person, is what makes the Green Goblin have that longevity. And then you couple that later on, of course, with killing Gwen Stacy, and you've got a villain for the ages. You're not ever going to have the specter of Norman Osborn and Green Goblin, which is why, to come around to what you were saying with Hobgoblin, like, Hobgoblin was so cool.
Yeah.
Because, and this, the mystery surrounding the Hobgoblin's identity basically was like the through line in Spider-Man comics throughout the 80s. And even through 3 writers.
Yeah.
So who's the best Goblin? I mean, of course it's Norman Osborn. But man, just the fact that concept has so many legs, or such legs, that it's run for so long and so many different iterations. And it always comes back to Norman Osborn and Peter Parker. And man, sidebar, holy crap, did No Way Home hit that note flawlessly.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think that was...
Oh, my God.
That was... I don't know. I think in time that's going to stand as one of the premier Spidey stories.
No, it is.
Premier arcs.
It already is.
Now, I mean, as I said, we could probably put that on some sort of pedestal now for it.
Yeah. Look, yeah, absolutely.
Easily. What did Barry say again?
Barry says he thinks that Tom DeFalco's original plan to have the Rose be Roderick Kingsley instead of Richard Fisk was a better take on the two. Now that's interesting. Going way back there with Roderick Kingsley stuff. That's old school. I got to think about that, Barry. I'm gonna
write that down.
I'm just gonna have to dig out my trusty Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh, not the omnibus.
#1, yes. And consult after the show and kind of get my feels on how I feel about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Barry might need to put down the old bourbon. Toss him back. I think he's talking some crazy right now.
Maybe. So all right. We're getting close to our hour here, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the granddaddy of them all. Well, maybe not the granddaddy. I think the granddaddy of them all is going to be the Stan versus Steve debate.
Yes.
And boy, I think that's probably a show unto itself. It's possible. And I don't want to necessarily dive into those choppy waters. So let's just get it out there now. Clones, good or bad? And I'm going to preface this by, yes, perceived wisdom for a very, very long time was bad, obviously. But I'm not going to lie to you, man. This current Beyond story has got me digging on a Ben Reilly vibe. It is great. And it always comes back to there's no such thing as bad characters. There's just writers that haven't figured out what to do with them yet.
Sure.
And the current Beyond Brain Trust, Kelly Thompson, Saladin Ahmed, Cody Ziegler, Zeb Wells.
Yeah.
They are, pardon me, they're really telling a damn good Spidey story.
Sure.
I have, we need to see how Beyond turns out. But I have to wonder, Mike, if the current story arc is going to make us go back and revisit the Clone Saga in a way where we reapprise it. Now, that's not to say that it's some secret masterpiece. It's not. It's absolutely not. It's a train wreck. And I mean, because they didn't know where they were going with the story. I think John Mark DeMatteis, if I'm misattributing this quote, forgive me, but stated that the original plan was to have all the clone stuff wrapped up in Amazing number 400, and then the book started selling well, and like, no, let's just keep the story going. And that's when you start getting goobers like Kane and Traveler, and now the clone is Spider-Man, and now he's not, and now he's wearing his web shooters on the outside, and it looks stupid, and now he's got a hoodie, and like, look, I get it. Younger generation has a very different take on the Clone Saga than we do because it's in the past. If you are talking about comics that just miss the mark, the Clone Saga is like the end all be all because it dragged on for 3 goddamn years. And
the thing is with Beyond, and I think you hit it on the head. Like
I usually do,
but with Beyond, I think you're right. I think once Beyond wraps up and we see what we're getting into and what the culmination is, maybe we revisit the clones. I don't want to go back to that dark time in my life.
There's a lot of trauma there, man.
That's 3 years I'm not getting back. I literally have like markers in the long box where that saga travels. I'm like, do not touch, like this will burn you. Like this is a bad place. you know, and
it is. But I mean,
if Beyond wraps it up to where, like you said, where there's no bad characters, only bad writers, if they can kind of patch everything up, and then you can go back. But I think for us in our generation, it may or may, if we can put that bias aside because we're like, God, that's a set that we.
And it's definitely a bias, but it's also a very deserved bias.
Right. And there's a little, and not to, be that person, there's a little boomerism there with our generation. We're like, well, the Clone Saga was really bad.
I think it's more of a Generation X thing because Gen X has like a built-in tendency to hate things and be sarcastic about everything.
The show was going so good, and then you brought up clones. Hey, man.
Well, and there's a lot of talented writers and artists that had bits and pieces of the Clone Saga. And I mean, Marvel behind the scenes, hey Chad, Marvel behind the scenes was a disaster at that time. They were on their editorial processes were a wreck. It's sort of like the stuff that was going on behind the scenes at Marvel sort of manifested in this poorly thought out 3-year-long story in Spider-Man, and you just kind of have a poster child for how bad things got for Marvel. But good can come from bad, right? Like, the Beyond stuff is really good, and it's kind of got me thinking maybe I want to revisit some of that Clone Saga stuff. Is it going to make up for maximum clonage and Spider Side? No, but maybe it will help to contextualize what we're seeing as being more of a product of its era than, oh my God, this is crap that we need to scrape off our shoe.
Right. All the chromium see-through covers and the foil covers.
Those chromium covers were dope.
They are. They're really great. Even the maximum clonage covers are, the orange chromium, But yeah, I mean, the covers were the best. Probably the covers in the speculation market were way better than what the actual Clone Saga was. So
it's just interesting the way these things are cyclical too. Because one generation doesn't like something like web pits, another generation loves it, or big eyes. And I mean, at the end of the day, Mike, Spider-Man is such a well-crafted character and well-built character that you can bend them like silly putty, and you can have them fight Gog in the Savage Land and have extra arms, or fight the umpteenth version of the Green Goblin, or throw Mary Jane off a bridge for the 50th time. And it all comes back it all comes back to, we love Spidey because we love Spidey. Yes. And you can put him through the 100 Clone Sagas. You can debate all day over whether or not he should be married, or whether this writer or that writer sucked. At the end of the day, Spider-Man endures because Spider-Man is just that character.
He is. And I'm going to go on could be a hot take, I don't know, but I've always thought that Spider-Man had the better villains in comics of the major characters.
Okay. So typically, all right, we're gonna throw that one out there, because typically that debate goes, who has the better rogues gallery, Batman or Spider-Man?
I'll go, and Joker is one of my all-time favorite characters, but I've always leaned towards Spidey as having the better writable villains, and it seems that the writers who write those villains have more fun with them. It just like,
well, I think that's I hear what you're saying. I think there's a difference though in how Batman and Spider-Man are constructed that is reflected in their villains, and so the more fun factor is going to play out more in, and personal stakes too is going to play out more with Spidey, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Batman, I think, like, you're just not touching Catwoman, Penguin, Two-Face, and Joker. I don't think those are touchable characters, and you can get into Scarecrow, Poison Ivy, Ra's al Ghul, and yeah, man, you know, if my grandma can tell you who the Joker is, then that's the winner, chicken dinner. But that doesn't mean that
I'll go with that.
all of the wonderfully animal-based plus Mysterio villains in Spidey Land aren't astounding. Like, look, it's the Dark Knight's Rogues Gallery, Spidey's Rogues Gallery, and number 3 would be for me would be the Flash's Rogues Gallery, and 3 and 2 not even close.
No. I think the big divide. Wow, would Flash be 3? Interesting. Okay, this might be.
You got to blame Jeff Johns for me on that one. Jeff Johns made me fall in love with the Rogues.
Yeah, great stuff.
Such good stuff. I know we're not supposed to invoke his name or whatever because he's a meanie head, but you know, it. Yeah. Anyway, we love Spider-Man at the end of the day. Spidey will always endure. I think that you know, 100 years from now, some other nerds are going to be talking about how awesome Spider-Man is because he's just that character.
And the thing is, we didn't even crack into characters that got spun off from Spider-Man. You know, we still.
we didn't even get into Miles or
Miles. We have
Spidey 2099.
Right.
Miguel represent. That's my man.
Yeah.
With
you know, so, I mean,
talents.
Yeah. Maybe there's a Spider-Man Part 2.
Could there be a Spidey Part 2? Oh my. Oh my. So you'll have to tune in next week. We want to real quick take a moment to thank our ever-loving sponsors, Lemon Juice McGee, Frankie's Comics, and Carson's Corner for sponsoring not just us, but also on the site itself. You know, they back us and we're grateful for it. And you know, I wish we could do more to reciprocate that gratitude than just give them a brief shout out at the end of the show. Like run their ads on our site, but
click those ads.
Oh wow! But anyway, you know, at the end of the day, we would be here in a lesser form without the folks that prop us up and support us. So thanks seriously to all of them. Next week, it's very possible we're going to get into part 2 of the Great Spidey debate, unplanned, and this is going to all have to do with the other Spidey characters out there. Ooh, Spider-Woman 2, not just Spider-Woman 1. So until next time, thank you for listening. Get out there, read something cool, support your local comic shop. And guys, above all, be good to each other. It's a crap world, and you know, it doesn't have to be. We control how it goes and how we respond to it, and a little kindness can go a very long way. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.